Hey everybody, it is time once again for another Rahdo Q&A. And hello everybody, I'm about to answer a bunch of questions submitted by folks like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And by all means, folks, if anything I talk about or my wife talks about, because she sometimes shows up on these as well, prompts any further questions from you, well, you know what to do. Questions@rahdo.com is the email address. Keep them coming, folks. I want to hear your cues so I can am. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. But, folks, I'm going to talk about several different topics today, and if any of them don't really strike your fancy, don't worry. There are links down in the show notes that let you jump around from question to question so you can listen to just the parts you're interested in. All right, sound good? Then let's go. Okay, folks, we're back, and Jen is here now, as evidenced by the tiny little picture right there in the corner of the screen. Although, if you were here, you could see there she's standing right there with a microphone.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, honey pie. Okay, we're going to have a few more gamey type questions before we get to the personal stuff.
Okay.
Jeff says, Richard sometimes mentions that a few years ago you were possibly getting burned out on the whole gaming thing. It suddenly forced Richard to be much more selective about choosing games to play with you for a Rahdo runs through. I just wondered, where are you these days, you being Jen, in terms of burnout versus enjoyment in the board game arena?
Well, that is a very interesting question, and thanks for asking. I think I am definitely further along the path.
Okay, that's not good news.
Of burnout versus enjoyment.
Uh-huh.
And I think, I was thinking about this the other day. It's because of decision overload.
Yeah.
It's just, things have been a bit full on for us with all of the things that we've been dealing with here in the States. And then to just have to make more decisions on top of it. Every single game requires, 7,000 decisions. I think it's just contributed a bit to mental load. Mm-hmm. And so I've gotten to the point, it was a game that we really liked when we were playing in Malta. We got an expansion for it and played it here. And I was just like, this is just work. It's just work. There's no fun. I'm not having a great time with this. And so we actually stopped playing it. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my tolerance for the just get through it so that you can, get to the, engine working in the game part has changed a lot. I'm less willing to put up with a lot of building or maintenance or something before the fun happens, I guess. Mm-hmm. Because I just can't, it's not fun anymore to just spin my wheels. So it's got to be a fun game now.
Well, it's always had to be a fun game.
Yeah, no, I think I had more tolerance for, getting through the boring parts before. Mm-hmm. But, and then we played another game recently, which was again,
for folks who are wondering, the first one she mentioned is Brussels 1893, the new Belle Epoque version, that she really just had a hard time getting into when we loved it in the past. And now the second one she's talking about is the new version of Zhanguo, First Empires. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so playing Zhanguo, it was immediately fun. I immediately had good feedback in that I actually achieved something within the first couple turns of the game. And I felt like I was actually making progress and building something, and I had interesting decisions and everything.
And I pointed out that everything you just said is true for Brussels as well. She happened to be in a situation where she was particularly good at buying and selling art to make money. And so she set off doing that and immediately had 6 or 7 times the starting capital she started with. And I'm just over here, just barely being able to squeeze 2 coins together. She can beat me on every single auction. I mean, she could absolutely destroy me, but for some reason she kept saying, I haven't done anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're the richest person in Europe. What do you mean you haven't done anything?
Yeah, I had no buildings, though. I hadn't actually done what I was there to do.
Yes.
So
because meanwhile, I was in a situation where I could build a little bit better. So I was building buildings, and Jen was just making untold wealth. But for some reason, that did not translate in her brain as actually achieving anything.
Right.
Which is interesting in and of itself, and I think probably warrants a deep dive on her psychology. Oh, that making money doesn't count is actually achieving something? Well, huzzah! Down with capitalism, Jen says.
But you would have thought I would have loved doing the art thing.
Yes, yeah, and you were buying and selling art
Yeah.
and a huge markup and just making tons and tons of cash while I was completely broke, but I'd built a few buildings.
Yeah, I don't know. So, yes, I think back in Malta I had a lot more mental space. Everything was fine with family and we were just living the dream and just didn't have a lot of stress in our lives and everything. But yeah, now I just feel like I've just got so much mental load that it's adding more for silly rules of games maybe isn't what my brain wants at the moment. So, yes, I'm getting pickier, I guess is the answer to that question.
All right. Would you call that burned out, though? Because the question was specifically about
burned out.
burnout. Which, to be fair, is not what happened years ago. What happened many, many years ago, early on in the within the first couple of years of starting the channel, was, at that point, I would cover pretty much anything, and there were things we just didn't like. And at one point you said, maybe we should take a break. You literally said, maybe we should just take a break from this gaming thing because Rahdo hadn't really caught on yet. And I'm like, oh dear. Well, I need to stop just throwing anything on the table because Jen is, I don't want to lose this avenue of something that we enjoy together. That also wasn't burnout either. That was just me not being very selective. And now I'm very selective. I mean, I was really surprised her response to Brussels 1893 because we both loved it to pieces, and I still loved it. I thought it was going fantastically, the game we were playing, but she just couldn't be bothered with all of her untold wealth to bother to convert that into success. And it was very strange. I mean, that game has a lot more machinations, a lot more. There's the game makes you make choices that don't have an immediate payoff. Like the most important thing being, hey, at the beginning of a round, when you're the lead player, you have to choose what worker placement spots are actually available. And that's a huge decision.
Yeah.
And then right after that, you have to choose, all right, now, if all the worker placement spots are available, which one am I going to destroy so that my opponent can't get it? And, I mean, those are big decisions that are 100% about the game and the game state and not actually about achieving anything. And I wonder if you were kind of negatively reacting to those. They're like, I have to work really hard to make this decision, and I'm not interested in this decision because this decision is 100% about just trying to figure out how to
screw you over, basically.
Via brinksmanship, deny you things, and it's a huge part of the game. And I think that was the kind of thing that both of us were more comfortable with 6 or 7 years ago. Zangwo didn't have anything like that. Zangwo was just like, right, what is the best way for me to build the thing I want to build? And, you told me 10 things I need to build. All right, I'll get right to work on that.
Yeah.
Whereas...
I mean, the only thing with Zangwo was that you got a bonus if you did it first.
Yeah.
So there was an urgency there.
Yeah, there was... whereas Brussels, again, I guess it's a bit more gamey in that there were meta decisions that had to be made, and I think maybe those are kind of what turned her off and didn't let her focus on, well, actually, you're really producing a lot of stuff. And you're creating a nest egg that will basically let you run rampant over this game for the rest of the game. But again, the main thing that money lets you do in that game is beat your opponent in auctions to deny them stuff. And I mean, she didn't mention this at all at the time because historically and traditionally, Jen's been pretty comfortable with take that and player screwage. And that's been something that I've never been. And my Care Bear attitudes have slowly rubbed off on her over the years, and she is her whole family knows her as a card shark. Growing up, there was like some Whisty type game that they used to play, and everybody don't play it with Jen because she'll destroy all of you and she'll revel in it. And I mean, when we first got into board gaming, her favorite game, one of her first favorite games was Tigris and Euphrates. And she thought nothing of just like, absolutely, right, okay, I'm going to move in here and take all this stuff to destroy everything you've ever done. And like, oh, wow, okay, that's fine. I guess I'll struggle against that. And meanwhile, I don't want to do that to you. And so I think over time, maybe she's just getting... I don't know. I'm hypothesizing that she's getting more Care Bearish as well.
I think that's definitely true.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I think, too, if you're always the conqueror,
yeah,
it's fun. But if you are sometimes the conquered,
Well, that's
you
interesting.
have the empathy of why you don't want to do that to your future playmates.
Yeah, I suppose. People often make the mistake of thinking that, oh, Rahdo doesn't like having his stuff destroyed. I'm like, no, I don't mind that at all. I don't mind playing a cutthroat game where somebody comes along and gives me challenges to overcome. I mean, I want challenges, whether it's the game giving it to me or another player. That's fine. I just don't want to be the challenge other people have to overcome. I don't want to burn down somebody else's whatever, castle that they built. Jen is kind of the opposite. She's stop burning down my castle. I'm working on it. Could you just leave my castle alone? I'm like, well,
You're not going to burn my castle down, are you?
Yeah. I don't want to do it. And she's like, well, please don't do it then.
Yeah.
Like, well, the game is kind of making this situation. And so we just kind of stay away from it. I really do think.
And then I'll say, are you going to burn down my castle? And you say, well, if you don't do this and that this turn, then I am going to be forced to do it next turn because that's a smart game move.
Yeah, because you're giving me no choice. I have to do this. So please just don't put me in a situation where I have to destroy your stuff.
Yeah.
And then we wonder, why are we even playing this game? It's making us have to do this dance when there are so many games that, like Zangguo, where we don't have to do that dance. We can just, strive to do our best. And it's more of a race and less of a conquest or a destruction. And I think, honey, that was really your response. You didn't articulate this at all at the time, and you were just kind of had a vague, I'm just not having fun. And I really do kind of think that that's what it is. That if anything, you're getting more burned out on. You're getting more in tune with me. Where a game where I have to make decisions solely for the purposes of hampering my opponent. This is not a fun decision, and it's making me work really hard at doing it to the best of my ability. I'm not that interested.
Yeah, and of course I'm going to min-max, AP it, and so to spend that amount of mental energy on something I don't even want to do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've distilled it down to what the problem was.
Yeah, because, it was really telling. We used to love Brussels. And the first time we had ever played Zangguo, the first edition, back in our Malta days, when, as Jen was saying, she had more mental load available to her, she said, yeah, I can't play this game. This game is way too much. But you very much enjoyed it now. Mm-hmm. To me, it was a really interesting test of this trip. Zangguo was maybe the most important game we played in this entire time we're down here, in spite of the fact that, as Jen said, we've got a lot of stuff going on in our personal lives, and she's having to juggle a lot of crap that is really, really important to resolve and is very, very difficult, and she handles it wonderfully. But I was hoping that the Mexico vibe would rub off on her and she wouldn't feel quite so stressed about everything. And Zangguo was a big test of it. And Zangguo proved, she could handle a game that 7 years ago she couldn't handle at all, even in our more laid-back situation. But then she hated Brussels. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? And I really do think the more I analyze it, and she said, I'm not having fun with decisions. I was focusing on, she's not building things, and accruing money is maybe not a fun thing for her. But really it is. Brussels 89.3 is surprisingly mean, and I had kind of forgotten how much so and how much more palatable, or we used to find that sort of thing that neither of us do anymore. Anything else you can think about on the state of burnout for you personally? Any other things you're less interested in? This is not the last question on this topic, so we will circle back around to it.
Okay. No, other than that, I really value our game playing time together, and I like that we have this thing that we share, and so I too do not want to lose this.
Yeah.
So
I would certainly say one thing is we used to both, and this is true for both of us, we used to have a lot more patience and acceptance of particularly long games, like 2.5, 3 hour games. And I think both of us have really, that has become a much more challenging thing for us to muster enthusiasm for. And at the same time, we're seeing more wonderful playing Euros that are done quick, like Zapotec or something, where you can just get all that rich, deep, fun gameplay in an hour. I mean, I think we would have always gravitated to that, but we're gravitating to that and gravitating away from long games more and more and more as time goes on. And it's not that it's because, we don't have as much time as we ever used to. It's just, we can only sit and focus on one thing for so long. Then I will move on to Jeff's question number 2. The gears in Tzolkin, the Mayan calendar.
love it.
continues to be one of the coolest and most unique gimmicks in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Are you surprised there hasn't been more use of physical or mechanical design elements like this? Magnets, levers, gears, lights.
I wish they would. I love a gadget. Man, I love a gadget. Oh, it's so memorable as well. What can I say? I love a gadget.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are other games that do it. What's it? I mean, Tzolkin the Mayan Calendar, yes, on the surface it looks like, oh, it's all about these gears, but the gears are really kind of immaterial. What Tzolkin the Mayan Calendar is really about is the passage of time, and using time as a resource that you have to manage, because you put a worker on that gear, and that gear very slowly moves throughout the rest of the game, and you have to decide when that worker is done with their work, and the longer they work, the better a result you get out of them. And that's what really makes that game special from a design perspective, and they just found a really cool, clever, gimmicky way to represent it. I mean, there's lots of ways that game could have been done. So you see things like Arboretum, which is just as much about time management, but instead they have little strips that slide along the board. And admittedly, that's not as cool. That's not, as Jen says, that's not as memorable, and it doesn't really stand out. From a gameplay perspective, it's everywhere near as meaningful. But I would say, why don't we see more of it? It's because, you know what, making some strips of cardboard that you put your meeples on and they slide along a track, rather than creating these big interlocking gears that have to rotate and not get stuck and all of that, is going to cost a lot more. I mean, the development and production costs of Tzolkin the Mayan Calendar, even though it came out almost 10 years ago, I mean, gosh, the fact that it came out 10 years ago, I can't even imagine how much that must have cost, and in research and development and prototyping and all that, and then the actual production of it, because there's nothing else like it. And board games are not a very profitable enterprise. That's the problem. And I mean, you mentioned magnets. There was an amazing game a few years ago. I can't remember the name of it now. It goes to show it didn't have staying, and where magnets were moved along the outskirts, and literally the player piece was a compass in the middle of the board, and as we moved the magnets around, it would change the facing of the compass face. It was basically little kids dealing, Stranger Things-y type situation, and I thought that was amazing, and and Jen thought it was very cool too. But I mean, the cost for producing that game, I'm sure, had to be a huge limiting factor on it, and it never really caught on. Tzolkin the Mayan Calendar is kind of the exception to the rule, and while you do see other games that are just as clever from the mechanisms, you don't see it in terms of the production, because again, very few people get rich off of board games. Yeah, Jamie Stegmaier got rich, and probably Elizabeth Hargraves too, but most people are just barely scraping by, trying not to lose money. So that's why you just don't see it very often. And that'll be the case until board games become as culturally relevant as video games are. Then you can afford it. When a moderate hit will sell in the millions as opposed to the thousands, which is where it is right now. It's where it has been for 10 years. And so, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things that could be done. But at the end of the day, the current target audience for board gamers, I think by and large, are not really drawn in by that. I remember when Tzolkin came out, everybody was saying, oh, what a cheap, crappy plastic gimmick to get us to buy the game. There's, amongst the die-hard board game elite, there is such an air of cynicism and just assuming the worst of everything that is it even worth putting all that work and blood, sweat, and tears into something that will just be immediately dismissed as, oh, that's a money-grabbing gimmick. They couldn't be bothered to come up with a good game, so they instead came up with a cheap trick. It's like, no, that's not. The single most depressing thing to me about my position in the board game industry is being constantly assailed with the rampant cynicism of the diehard board game elite. And and at the end of the day, that's where the majority of the money is. So I think there's probably several reasons why we don't see it more, Jeff. Alrighty. Top has a few game-related questions. A few months ago, someone was asking about board game burnout, so I assume both Top and Jeff must have seen this around the same time to have burnout questions come in. Both of you mentioned how it's great you haven't burned out on board games. However, it seems to me you did get burned out on at least one subgenre, escape games. I believe this was actual burnout. You used to love them and you played too many. So, questions. Why did you get burned out on them? Have your tastes changed? Has the situation changed? Or is it just too much? Did it become too samey, too predictable, or too difficult?
Well, gosh. I think we really drilled down on the last one as to why there would be burnout. I think we've got limited time and attention, and we want our gaming time to be enjoyable rather than just, I don't know. I can't think of the right word. Just make ready work. Just
busy work.
Busy work. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that
but
my
do you
tolerance.
feel that way about escape rooms? I don't think that's the problem. With
Oh
escape
no,
rooms.
I just feel stupid for doing escape rooms because and I don't blame them. The people have to keep coming up with interesting ways. Otherwise, escape rooms become way too easy, right? Once you've done a few of them, you know all of the places to look.
Our favorite escape rooms by far have been ones that most fans of escape rooms say, "Oh yeah, that's for babies." We're like, okay, great, more of that, please, because we enjoy that. The Deckscape series specifically, its most difficult one is easier than the easiest one from Exit the Game or the Unlock series, and we're like, okay, these ones we enjoy, and we've actually done real world escape rooms too. And we're like, this is ridiculously expensive, and we don't like this at all.
Yeah.
Just because, I don't know, we don't feel, for whatever reason, compelled to rise to the challenge of solving these weird, esoteric, arbitrary puzzles that, as Jen said, just makes us feel stupid. We played one not too long ago. We kind of came out of retirement for escape rooms and tried the Lord of the Rings one from the Exit, Lord of the Rings, Shadows of Mordor, or something like that. And that was just a miserable 2 hours.
Because of course we were supposed to get it done in an hour.
Yes.
It took us 2.
I think it was about an hour and a half. I think we were at 30 minutes over what we should have been.
Okay. Well, anyway. And yeah, like I said, I don't blame the creators for coming up with weirdo stuff because a lot of hardcore engineer types probably need weirdo puzzles to solve. But the rest of us norms, I don't know. I just want to feel good. Like there's some challenge there. We had to think about it. We had to, think differently a little bit, but it's not some weird ass thing that I don't want to spoil the Mordor one. I'm thinking of that particular thing where we put the thing on top of the thing. And yeah, so
Yeah. To answer your question, I would say it's too difficult. I imagine if they made a line of escape rooms for children, we'd probably enjoy those enough. I guess.
It's kind of like we used to geocache a lot, and
Yes.
there are people now who are going to the level 100 when they do their geocache placements, where they're really cool. They're amazing puzzles, and you got to figure. I can remember one we did one time that was just disguised as a utility box on a telephone pole, and how cool that was. If you don't notice to look into a gray plastic, like electric box on a utility pole, you would never have found that, but somehow. Yeah, we figured it out in the middle of nowhere that there wouldn't be but anyway, so yeah, it's cool if it's figure outable enough, but I guess have they been around long enough that they have to go to these really weird extremes to keep people interested?
All right.
I don't know.
Second question. Do you see yourself getting back into them if enough time passes?
In theory, if enough time passes, they'll be at the level 1,000, and we can't even handle level 100 at this point.
All right.
So I don't know. I mean, I enjoy the parts I enjoy about them. Like when I do figure out something, I'll be like, yeah, we did that one. Okay, we got through, So I would still probably play them just because there will be some fulfillment in there if you will play with me.
Yeah, I hate them.
Yeah, all right.
Are there any other subgenres that you've come burned out on? I'm not talking about things that you've discovered you don't like take that elements, but things you might still like, but are just burned out on. Well, I think, mentioned earlier that probably the biggest one is just the length of games.
Yeah.
That we just don't have the patience. I'll tell you another one, though. Combat-heavy games. Right,
Yes.
would you agree?
Yes. What was that one we played recently?
We just played Oathsworn.
Yeah.
And we're like, wow, we're having to work really hard at this just to figure out how to kill some animals.
Rats. They were gross rats.
Is this worth it? I mean, shouldn't we go build a city instead? Yeah, because this is a lot of work to do this.
Yeah.
And this is from, we played, I mean, probably Gloomhaven is the game we played, both of us, in board game form more than any other game. More than most other games combined. We played so much Gloomhaven. But, yeah, I think that's probably a big one, is that neither of us have, it's hard to muster enthusiasm for, right, let's go in and kill a bunch of things. Even if it's righteous self-defense or saving the day or whatever, it's just combat as a general rule in analog cardboard form, I think, is just kind of tired of it.
Yep. I will agree with that.
Okay.
Totes.
Can you think of anything else?
No, I think you've done it.
Alrighty. Not long ago, a Muggle friend of mine, for listeners who don't know, that's someone who isn't into the hobby, asked me for board game suggestions to play with their family over the holidays. I gave him a list of ideas and actually lent him the game. And briefly, I went over the selling points of each. However, this turned out to be a terrible experiment. Even games that are gateway-ish, like Splendor or Azul, are maybe not fun if you don't have an experienced person guiding you through it the first time. Do you think this may be a problem with nearly every modern designer board game besides party-style games that have almost no rules? I think Muggles are not going to want to do the homework reading the rules unless they're ultra simple. Does anything occur to you to try in this situation? I'm not going to ask for game suggestions unless some pop in your head, because I know you would just refer to me to Board Game Geek. Let's see. Well, first of all, it's interesting you mentioned Splendor and Azul. We hate both those games. We did not like them.
I liked Azul. It was very pretty.
Yes, Azul is pretty, and Splendor, neither of us enjoyed. Splendor, we just thought, wow, this is busy work for no appreciable upside. This is just kind of going through the motions. There's nothing interesting or engaging about it at all. And I know we're very much in the minority, and I still, to this day, maintain that Splendor's ridiculous runaway success has more to do with those poker chips than with the actual gameplay. I'm not saying it's a bad design, but it was just so vanilla. And there was just not too terribly much interesting. I should also add, all of that is based on 2-player gaming. Maybe it really blossoms a higher player count, but we just could not get into it at all. So I don't understand why people find that so compelling, and I could certainly see why it would fall flat on its face as a gateway game. Because to me, there's just nothing engaging or compelling or about it. And Azul, here's the deal. You chose 2 incredibly abstract games. And I think... if you had been, as you said, if you had been there yourself, I mean, that's the true secret sauce to get people into board gaming, is don't just give them the games and let them go on their own to try and figure it out themselves, because it's probably going to fail no matter what game you choose, unless they're of a certain mindset. And if they're of a certain mindset, then they'll end up becoming obsessed just like you and just like us. I mean, we tried a copy of Pandemic, and it turned us into all of this. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who try Pandemic like, this is a waste of my time. Why would I spend any time worrying about this or thinking about this? This is too hard. I'll just go watch a movie or read a book or whatever, or solve a Sudoku puzzle if I wanted to have this kind of experience. This is too much. But it's interesting you mentioned those 2 specifically, because I have railed on about this in the past, that there is nothing more important for engaging someone's imagination than telling them a story. And those are 2 games. I mean, Azul has a theme, but they kind of bury it. They literally obfuscate it, and Splendor doesn't have one at all. Splendor is a pure abstract game. It's the definition of a pasted-on theme. Azul could have been a strong thematic game if they had done a little bit of work, but they chose not to. And then instead, they literally present what could be a thematic game as an abstract. And I think you didn't do yourself any favors by choosing those 2. Because your friends are like, why? What is the point of this? All this work just to move some little colorful pieces around. I mean, if we want to do this, I might as well just play checkers. What's the difference? And I would say the difference is those 2 games you chose for them do not have stories that will pull them in, that make them feel like, oh, I am a person in a place or a time trying to achieve a goal that resonates with me, that I can recognize. And so, yeah, I think those were bad choices. And I think a great gateway game tells stories to pull people in. But then also, as you say, a great gateway game also has to have super simple mechanisms, and ideally a very short rule book. The last time I tried to do a top 10 gateway games, I think I've done top 10 gateway games 3 times, twice in the past and then once on the R&R show. And I think the most recent one I did on the R&R show, I hadn't done this before, but I was actually going back and looking at the rule books and trying to pick ones where like, okay, I feel comfortable. Forget about the game. Forget about giving the game to somebody and hoping that it will turn them into a board game fanatic. Giving them the rule book. And there are very, very few rules that actually get it right. Because, I mean, as time goes on, board game rule book writers are getting worse at their job. They are doing a more and more poor job. I've railed about this in the past as well, about front-loading information and, not using their theme to actually get across the mechanisms. And it just seems like as time goes on, no matter how much I complain about this, board game publishers just get worse and worse at this most crucial job. Still to this day, nobody does it better than Vlad Chvátil in Czech Games Edition. They understood how important it was to tell a story and tell the story in the rule book too, so that the person reading the rule book can be compelled to read the whole friggin' thing. Excuse me.
Can I just say something I really enjoyed about Oathsworn?
That's good, because I'm going to get a drink of water while you say something.
Okay. I was actually drawn in pretty quickly to Oathsworn.
Yes.
Because of the amazing story and the Scottish guy who was who was narrating it, and I just thought, oh, this is going to be really fun. And yeah, I love it when you read to me, Honey Pie,
yeah.
But it's nice to have a Scottish accent every so often.
I don't think I can pull that off.
No, not for a long term. No. But anyway, so I am going to have to agree because, we really enjoyed playing. I can't think of the name. The other one, not Oathsworn. The other one that we played tons of.
Gloomhaven.
Thank you. All I could think was Goblin Sworn, but of course that wouldn't. Gloomhaven, and because of the story. And then, like I said, I was kind of excited about Oathsworn, but then when we got to the actual, I was just going to try and get through the battle so we could get back to the story.
Yeah.
And we couldn't make it through the battle, the first rat battle.
Yep.
So anyway, back to you, honey.
Yeah. So, all right, what was the question? Does anything occur to you to try in this situation? Well, first of all, the thing to do. Don't just give them the game, unless it's a party game. You've got to come along, and you've got to be the hook. You've got to be the killer app that gets them into that.
Yes, but at the same time, you can't be the one that wins because nobody likes. I remember I was taught a game at a game shop, and the guy teaching it knew all of the, had played it 1,000 times, whatever, knew what he was doing, and just wiped the floor with all of us.
Yeah.
So that's not a good experience either.
Yeah. That's a bad teacher.
Yep.
If you're destroying your opponents, you are a bad board game teacher, quite frankly.
Yeah,
because you did not do a good enough job making your students
understand what their choices were.
Yeah, feel like they have a sense of agency and that they have a chance of success. Do you remember what game that was?
Oh, FO might.
Oh, so you were there too?
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, that was what, 9 years ago, probably. I don't remember it. It was a good game, but it's no fun to get your hat, yeah.
Your clock clean.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say something else, but yes.
Yep. Yeah, that was not good.
Because you feel at the end like, oh, he didn't tell me all this stuff, and he just wiped the floor with me, and maybe I just couldn't take it all in. Maybe that was my fault, but I left again that game feeling a little stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and everybody loves talking about that Twitter video of actor Mandy Patinkin trying to play Wingspan and just absolutely failing, and how it just goes to show that board games can't actually break through. I'd be willing to bet his nephew probably did a terrible, terrible, terrible job teaching how to play Wingspan to Mandy Patinkin, or maybe was just too charmed by his uncle and was laughing too much to actually do a good job. Because I'm sure Mandy Patinkin is a smart man and could handle Wingspan no problem with the right teaching. And it's so easy to mess it up. So yeah, you said you don't want examples, so I will not go down that road trying to find you examples, but all I will say is there are definitely 100% fantastic games that you can hand over. And Splendor and Azul are not them because they are too abstract. And I think that is a very important element that far too many board game fanatics tend to forget, that human beings are driven by story. It's the cornerstone of our success as a species. Telling stories is what brings us together and creates community. And it's what can create a board game fan too. Alrighty, P.S. I just listened to your podcast, and sometimes you narrate your Google searches, and it sounds like maybe you're typing in the word Board Game Geek, since forever Google knows what BGG means. Thank you for that. Actually, I don't type in Board Game Geek. I just type in the letter B because I go to Board Game Geek and search it, at least 24 times a day, and Chrome knows that B means Board Game Geek. So I'm just saying it out loud because I know most people are listening. And I think you're right. I do know that you can just type in BGG, but that's too many letters. I just type in B. And Chrome takes care of the rest. Okay, folks, and that is it for gaming-related stuff, although I have yet to actually record my part. I'll do that later. But hang on, and we'll be right back, and we'll be getting to some personal Q&As right after this. And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.